They said it was just another comet, but comets don't stop, and they definitely don't look back. Before we begin, take a second to subscribe, because what you're about to hear isn't another ordinary space story. It's a mystery still unfolding, one that's leaving even NASA speechless. It started quietly, a faint dot gliding through the black sea of space. Telescopes caught it by accident, moving faster than anything we'd seen before. At first, it seemed routine, just another icy traveler falling toward the Sunday. Astronomers logged it, tagged it, and moved on. They called it 3-Eye Atlas. But 3-Eye Atlas wasn't ordinary. It wasn't just moving fast, it was moving wrong. When it raced past Jupiter, it was clocked at 130,000 miles per hour, faster than any spacecraft humanity has ever launched. At that speed, even Mars would have been nothing more than a blur in its rear view. And yet, as it neared the red planet, something happened that no one could explain. In a single moment, the universe broke its own rules. The object, the size of a small mountain, stopped, not slowed down, not drifted, just stopped, perfectly still. Every radar system, every telescope, every sensor watching the Martian sky recorded it. 3-Eye Atlas froze above Mars in total silence. For NASA's engineers, it was like watching a miracle that shouldn't exist. To halt something that massive moving that fast would take more power than every nuclear reactor on Earth running for years. The kind of energy that could boil oceans. But there was no explosion, no heat, not even a spark. It was just still, calm, cold, watching. When they ran the numbers, nothing made sense. It was as if inertia itself had been switched off. A NASA analyst reportedly whispered, "This is a mechanical impossibility." But the readings didn't lie. 3-Eye Atlas wasn't drifting, it was in control. Infrared satellites swept the area, searching for heat. But the readings came back flat. Nothing. The object was just a few degrees warmer than deep space itself, colder than any working machine could possibly be. And then came the flash. A single burst of light blue-white, sharp and structured, blinked for less than a second. No fire, no radiation, no debris, just the flash, too perfect to be random. One scientist described it as the cleanest energy event ever recorded, if you can even call it energy, because whatever it was, it didn't behave like anything humans had ever seen. It was as if someone or something had pressed pause on the universe. Hours turned into days. The object remained locked above Mars, unmoving, silent, but soon it started to act. Tiny electromagnetic pulses began flickering from its surface, short bursts of rhythm repeating like a code. At first, scientists thought it was just interference, but then the pattern changed. The pulses swept across Mars in perfect grids, line by line, as though scanning the planet from orbit. They weren't random. They were precise. Within 12 hours, those pulses began focusing over one specific region, a place called Cydonia. the same region that's home to the famous face on Mars, and what the scanners found there would change everything. NASA's Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter picked up something beneath the surface: deep structures, long tunnels, even frozen reservoirs that had never been mapped before. The object seemed to know where to look, like it had studied the planet long before we ever arrived. Then, suddenly, it began to move again. 3i Atlas started releasing smaller modules, first 3, then 10, then 23, each one separated cleanly, drifting down toward the Martian surface in formation. They glided through the thin atmosphere, and then, at the moment of contact, they vanished. No crash, no dust, no heat, no radio signal, just gone. It's like the planet swallowed them, one geophysicist muttered during the live telemetry feed. And then the pulses stopped. For almost an entire day, Mars was quiet again. No movement, no light, no signal, just that enormous, silent object hanging above the planet like a question that no one could answer. And then, at 3 in the morning at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, a new signal appeared. This time, it wasn't random. It was deliberate. A sequence of prime numbers, followed by the digits of pi, repeating to 24 places. A message. SETI responded, sending back a simple transmission: the atomic numbers for hydrogen and oxygen, the universal markers of life and water. Minutes later, 3i Atlas replied. The signal formed a grid: numbers, coordinates, data. When decoded, it revealed an image, not of Mars, but of Earth, our continents, our oceans, and over them our satellite orbits mapped with chilling precision. That was the moment everything changed. The observatories went quiet. Military networks went encrypted. And NASA stopped talking altogether, because 3i Atlas wasn't just scanning anymore. It was listening. And maybe it was preparing. Whatever it is, comet, probe, or something far beyond us, it's coming closer. And this is only the beginning. When the decoded image first appeared on the NASA monitors, no one spoke. It was Earth, every continent, every ocean, drawn in perfect mathematical precision. But layered over it were lines, hundreds of them, each representing an orbit, the exact paths of communication, satellites, military ones too, including those never listed on any public record. That was the first clue that 3i Atlas wasn't guessing. It knew. It had seen us before. Within an hour of that signal, NASA's servers went dark. Every observatory tracking the object was rerouted through military channels. The world's telescopes, Hubble, Webb, the European Space Agency's Mars cameras, were quietly locked behind encryption firewalls. Something this big wasn't just an astronomical discovery anymore. It was a national threat. For the first time in decades, even the International Space Station received a classified blackout order. All live transmissions were delayed by 10 minutes. All frequencies were monitored. And that's when the second signal arrived. It came not as light, but as interference. Static across radar bands, distortion across satellite feeds, but hidden inside that static was structure, repeating frequencies, spaced with clock-like precision. To the human ear, it sounded like noise. But to software spectrograms, it was unmistakable. A pulse rhythm tied to Earth's rotational frequency. 3I Atlas wasn't just orbiting Mars anymore. It was syncing with Earth. The object began moving again, and this time, there was no mistaking its path. Trajectory data showed it performing a gravitational slingshot using Mars, gaining acceleration but not heat. Still cold, still silent, still impossible. Its new course? A direct intersection with Earth's orbit arriving in just under 7 weeks. Behind closed doors, emergency meetings began. The Pentagon, ESA, JAXA, and Roscosmos each had teams analyzing the telemetry, but none of their models made sense. An object that size, moving that fast, should have shown a comet tail, a thermal signature, radiation trail, something. But it emitted nothing. Every energy scan came back blank. No ionization, no propulsion, no decay. It was as if the laws of physics had taken a break. One astrophysicist compared it to watching a ghost ship moving through a storm but never getting wet. As it left Mars behind, the pulses changed again. The rhythm slowed. Each burst carried faint modulation sequences that, when amplified, sounded eerily like breathing. Scientists dismissed it as radio distortion. But the pattern kept repeating every 91 seconds. The same interval as Earth's heartbeat when measured across its ionospheric resonance. The same pulse that lightning storms create inside our atmosphere. Coincidence? Maybe. But some scientists started calling it the sync. By week 2, the world began noticing strange things. Not in the skies, but in the satellites. Global positioning systems started desynchronizing by milliseconds. Minor enough that only aerospace engineers would notice, but enough to disrupt calibration across entire satellite constellations. NASA's Deep Space Network began losing lock-on signals. Not because of interference, but because something else was transmitting on the same frequencies. 3I Atlas was hijacking the network. It began piggybacking on existing transmissions, embedding data packets into communications, bouncing between satellites. Encrypted, almost undetectable, until analysts at NORAD discovered a string of code repeating inside random telemetry bursts. It wasn't human. It wasn't noise. It was binary, clean, structured, and recursive. Each line mirrored the last, evolving with every loop like a program rewriting itself. By the 4th week, the moon started glowing faintly on the dark side, not visible to the naked eye, but clearly there on thermal maps. At first, it was dismissed as reflected sunlight from Earth's atmosphere. But the glow didn't move with the Sunday. It moved with 3I Atlas. When the object crossed the midpoint between Mars and Earth, a subtle vibration was detected in the magnetosphere. a low-frequency hum registering across magnetometers from Alaska to Siberia. Barely audible, but rhythmic, predictable, like a countdown. Somewhere in the static, the signal shifted again. This time, it wasn't numbers, it was sound. The recording, leaked later to European labs, lasted just 12 seconds. But what it contained was enough to terrify even the skeptics. It wasn't random tones or white noise. It was speech-like modulation, a voice-like pattern repeating twice, though no language expert could translate it. When slowed down, it resembled a human phrase, but the only words that anyone could distinguish sounded eerily like, "We are synchronized." The phrase spread through every private channel in astrophysics communities. Half called it pareidolia, the brain hearing, meaning where there was none. The other half, quietly terrified, said it wasn't a coincidence at all, especially when radar from the European Space Agency confirmed a disturbing new fact. 3I Atlas wasn't just passing through the solar system anymore. It had adjusted course, a maneuver that required deliberate control. Its vector was no longer fixed to an orbital plane. It was adapting. By week 5, it wasn't just on the path toward Earth. It was aligning with Earth's orbital tilt, matching its spin, mimicking its axis, its rhythm, its electromagnetic heartbeat. It wasn't just approaching. It was locking on. Inside NASA's mission logs, one anonymous engineer left a final note before the servers went dark. It read, "Is greater than, we think it's reading us not with light, but with resonance. Whatever this thing is, it's not flying through space. It's flying within it, using the fabric itself like an instrument." And that's when something strange began happening to the Voyager probes, the oldest machines humanity had ever sent beyond the stars. Both Voyagers, silent for years, suddenly transmitted short bursts of data. No one knew what triggered them. But when decoded, the signal matched the frequency pattern of 3I Atlas. It wasn't just coming to us. It was talking to something that left us behind. That's how it began. The alignment, the interference, the silence. No explosions, no lasers, no invasion. Just a quiet, deliberate synchronization between an object from the stars and a planet that thought it was alone. And in the final week before impact, Earth's skies began to change. But that comes next. The first signs didn't come from the sky. They came from the ground. It started with the magnetometers in Greenland, then in Chile, then Australia. All of them instruments separated by thousands of miles began vibrating in perfect unison. Every 6 minutes, on the dot, a faint pulse, barely measurable, yet globally synchronized. At first, scientists thought it was a coincidence, solar winds perhaps, or fluctuations from Earth's molten core. But solar activity was at its lowest in years, and the magnetic field wasn't fluctuating randomly. It was keeping time. Someone or something was tapping on Earth's magnetic shield, and the rhythm matched the pulse of 3I Atlas. By then, the object had crossed halfway between Mars and Earth. Every telescope trained on it saw the same thing, a smooth, cold, featureless shape, reflecting almost nothing. Radar couldn't lock on. Infrared showed only the faintest outline, shimmering as though half of it wasn't even there. When light hit it, the object didn't scatter it back. It seemed to swallow it, as if reality bent slightly at its surface. The more scientists tried to analyze it, the less it behaved like a solid object and more like a field. Then came the second wave of anomalies. Satellites orbiting Earth began misbehaving. GPS time codes drifted by fractions of a second, not enough to crash systems, but enough to confuse them. Weather satellites started sending images with impossible distortions, shapes appearing where there should be empty cloud. And on the dark side of the planet, near the equator, the aurora lights appeared where they never had before. Green and violet waves shimmered across the tropics, dancing like curtains of plasma over the night sea. The sky looked alive, breathing, pulsing in rhythm with something unseen. Pilots flying over the Pacific described instruments that flickered, froze, and then rebooted themselves perfectly synced with that pulse. 6 minutes every time. Inside NASA, the mood shifted from disbelief to quiet dread. They had seen patterns before, but never like this. The magnetic field wasn't just resonating. It was modulating, shaping itself around invisible points of interference. It was as though Earth's magnetosphere had become an antenna, and 3-eye Atlas was tuning it. One researcher described it best. It's greater than it's not sending us signals anymore. It's using us to send them. Then, as if responding to that realization, the signal changed again. It wasn't coming from space anymore. It was coming from below. Deep Earth observatories in Finland, Alaska, and South Africa all reported a strange echo, low-frequency waves bouncing through the crust, identical to those coming from the object in space. But these weren't reflections. They were transmissions, originating from inside the Earth itself. No one could explain how that was possible. Some said it was a natural resonance, the planet vibrating like a bell under stress. But the timing was too perfect. Every pulse from space was followed exactly 6.8 seconds later by one from underground. Something below us was answering. The military classified it instantly, but leaks spread fast. Ham radio operators, scanning unused frequencies, began picking up strange background hums. Amateur astronomers heard rhythmic static when pointing antennas toward the moon. People started calling it the breathing of the planet. At first, it was harmless. Then things got stranger. Animals began reacting days before the public even knew. Whales changed migration routes. Flocks of birds started flying in endless circles. Even household pets, cats, dogs, livestock became restless during those 6-minute intervals. Something deep within them felt it, the silent beat of an approaching presence. And then the Voyager probes sent another signal, the same pattern as before, but this time it contained additional data coordinates. When plotted, the coordinates didn't lead to a point in space. They pointed toward Earth's South Pole. For years, The South Pole had hosted one of NASA's most sensitive instruments, the Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory, buried beneath 2 kilometers of Antarctic ice. It was designed to detect invisible particles passing through the planet. But now, its sensors were detecting something else. A beam faint, structured, rhythmic rising from beneath the ice. Not from the sky, but from the ground up. The pulse frequency matched that of 3I Atlas exactly. For the first time in recorded history, scientists confirmed it. Earth itself was sending a signal once synchronized with an object millions of miles away. But there was more. The beam wasn't just noise. Hidden in its structure was data. Encoded math, fractal geometry, golden ratio harmonics, the same patterns found in living organisms. It was as if the planet was trying to communicate using the same universal language that life itself obeys. When the decoded pattern was fed through visual software, it formed a perfect spiral. And at the center of that spiral, a shape emerged. Not a circle, not a star, but something eerily familiar. It was the same geometric outline as the surface scans of 3I Atlas. That's when realization struck the scientists watching the monitor. The object wasn't interacting with Earth. It was mirroring it. Whatever was in orbit wasn't just observing. It was synchronizing, aligning itself with the planet's magnetic, biological, and even digital frequencies. All across the world, small disruptions became harder to ignore. Clocks lost seconds. Satellites blinked out. Radio bands went quiet. Even the internet backbone slowed under unexplained latency spikes every 6 minutes. It wasn't chaos, it was coordination. Something vast, invisible, and deliberate was moving in harmony with the planet. And by the time the 7th week arrived, one final transmission came through. Short, direct, and impossible. It came not from 3I Atlas, nor from Earth, but from the Moon. A 12-second pulse. Then silence. The timing matched the countdown. Something was coming out of synchronization and about to make contact. It began as a flicker, a tiny white pulse on the dark side of the Moon. Astronomers dismissed it as glare, a camera artifact, maybe a cosmic ray hit on the lens. But then it pulsed again. Exactly 6 minutes later, then again, and again. The rhythm matched the heartbeat of 3I Atlas perfectly. Across the deep space network, telescopes locked in on the signal. It wasn't light reflected from the sun. It was emission. A clean monochromatic beam in the microwave range, sharp enough to slice through cosmic background noise like a needle through fabric. At first, it seemed random. Then, analysts noticed something chilling. Each pulse carried a timestamp, a set of coordinates, and a delay. The delay wasn't random either. It corresponded to the distance between the Moon and Earth, as if the signal was echoing through us. The Moon wasn't transmitting. It was relaying. When the data from Ice Cube in Antarctica and the lunar telescopes were compared, the pattern was undeniable. Every time the Earth's magnetic field pulsed, the Moon answered back with a faint reflection, not light, not heat, but structure. It was like watching two mirrors trying to face each other across the void. Then the images started coming in. The Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, quietly scanning the far side, sent back a sequence of frames that shouldn't exist. In one image, the grey dust plains looked ordinary. In the next taken, barely 40 seconds later, a new shadow had appeared, perfectly circular, a ring nearly 100 kilometers wide, faintly luminescent around the edges. Its glow pulsed with the same rhythm as the Earth's magnetic hum. The crater hadn't formed, it had activated. When brightness was enhanced, the center of that ring showed a geometry too precise to be natural hexagonal ridges, symmetrical arcs, repeating radial lines. To the naked eye, it looked like the lid of an enormous machine half buried beneath the lunar surface. NASA froze the feed, but European observatories had already mirrored it. By dawn, the image had leaked. The internet called it the lunar eye. For 48 hours, the world argued hoax, artifact, simulation glitch. But then the next transmission came and the debate ended. At 3:14 UTC, the ring flared bright blue-white. Sensors from multiple nations registered a burst of electromagnetic energy, not chaotic like an explosion, but sequenced, a structured waveform cascading outward from the moon and striking Earth's magnetosphere head-on. For 6 full minutes, the planet's field reversed. Compasses spun. Navigation systems crashed. Auroras ignited everywhere at once, from Alaska to the equator, even above deserts and oceans where no aurora should ever exist. The night sky turned into a curtain of shifting color: green, red, violet, gold, rippling like breath. The world watched in silence. Then, at the very moment the colors peaked, 3I Atlas responded. Every radio telescope pointed toward the object caught the same event. A wave of gravity-like distortion expanding outward, bending starlight, twisting cosmic background radiation into spirals. The distortion wasn't random. It was directed toward the moon. And in that instant, the distance between them changed. Not gradually, instantly, as if space itself folded. 3I Atlas was now less than 1 million kilometers from the moon, a jump that no known propulsion system could make without annihilation, yet the object remained cold, silent, unburned. Inside NASA's deep vault control rooms, one phrase echoed again and again: is greater than it's not traveling through space. It's moving within it. The idea horrified physicists, because if true, then distance, the very concept of movement, meant nothing to whatever was controlling that thing. Then, for the first time, the object turned. High-resolution arrays from Hawaii's Keck Observatory caught the silhouette rotating on its axis, revealing vast, flat plains that reflected starlight like metal. But scattered across its surface were thin, luminous veins, running in patterns, geometric, symmetrical, deliberate. They pulsed in sequence with the moon's ring. One scientist whispered, "It's charging." Another corrected him, "No, it's opening." Back on Earth, strange side effects began. Electrical grids flickered in synchronization with the pulses. GPS satellites drifted out of alignment, then snapped back as if corrected by an unseen hand. Even the Schumann resonance Earth's natural electromagnetic heartbeat shifted up by a full hertz, a change that should take centuries, not seconds. People felt it. Migraines, vertigo, heart palpitations timed with the sky's flicker. Hospitals reported thousands of simultaneous episodes across every continent. It was as if the planet's rhythm had been hijacked and every living thing was now keeping time with something alien. Then, just before sunrise over the Pacific, the lunar ring pulsed one last time. The glow faded to grey, leaving behind an enormous geometric scar across the moon's face, too vast to be a shadow, too structured to be natural. And in the silence that followed, the final transmission arrived, a simple repeating phrase, buried within the cosmic microwave background. Encoded in binary, translated by half a dozen research teams, it read, "Is greater than synchronization complete." Every receiver on Earth went quiet. Every satellite fell into the same frequency. And the object 3I Atlas stopped again, perfectly motionless between the Earth and the Moon, aligned over the equator, locked in a gravitational balance that should have been impossible. For the first time in human history, the planet and the stars were in perfect mathematical resonance. But no one knew whether that meant communication or the start of something far worse. The moment the word synchronization complete appeared on NASA's monitors, every instrument went blind. Not malfunctioning, just silent. The data feeds were there. The numbers were still streaming, but all of them had frozen on one exact value, 0. Every telescope, every magnetometer, every gravitational sensor showed the same flat line. It was as if the entire solar system had exhaled and then held its breath. For 23 minutes, nothing happened. No new signals, no pulses, not even cosmic background noise. Space itself went still. Then, faintly, the hum returned. At first, it was inaudible, a vibration too low for human hearing, yet strong enough to shake instruments around the world. Seismographs in Japan, Chile, and Turkey all began to tremble in perfect unison. But there were no earthquakes, no tectonic shifts. The movement was vertical, as if the ground itself was breathing. Every 6 minutes, just like before. When audio engineers translated the frequency into sound, it resembled a slow heartbeat mixed with mechanical resonance too regular to be natural. The tone was deep, layered, and disturbingly familiar. Its waveform matched the magnetic profile of 3I Atlas. Earth wasn't just receiving the signal anymore, it was amplifying it. By day 3, magnetic poles around the world began to drift. The North Magnetic Pole, which had already been migrating toward Siberia for decades, suddenly accelerated, moving more than 200 kilometers overnight. Compasses everywhere spun uselessly. Navigation satellites could no longer correct orientation. The field wasn't just shifting, it was splitting. For the first time in recorded history, 2 separate North Poles appeared, one near Canada, another near Siberia, with a third point forming faintly near the Pacific. The planet's magnetic architecture was no longer stable. It was reorganizing. And above each magnetic convergence, orbiting satellites captured the same impossible phenomenon. Faint, translucent spheres of light hovering in the upper atmosphere, spinning like halos. At first, they were small, no larger than city clouds. But within hours, they expanded, becoming vast glowing domes, shimmering with faint lattice patterns. Inside each dome, the air itself vibrated. The sound wasn't loud. It was low, soft, harmonic. People standing beneath the glowing skies described a strange calm, as if their thoughts were being muffled by invisible hands. Cities beneath those domes, from Novosibirsk to Anchorage to Honolulu, reported power fluctuations. LED lights dimmed and flickered in rhythm with a pulse from space. Airplanes refused to start. GPS systems pointed in every direction at once. Yet the people inside the dome said they felt nothing. No heat, no static, only a strange, almost comforting vibration, like standing near a giant cat's purr. Meanwhile, in orbit, the object we once called a comet was changing again. Its shape, once smooth and formless, now showed definition, ribs, edges, and glowing fractures along its hull. NASA's high-contrast imagery revealed what looked like columns rising from its surface, tall, symmetrical spires, each emitting light in a specific pattern. At first, the lights seemed random, but when stitched together in time-lapse, a terrifying truth emerged. Each spire's pattern corresponded exactly to the coordinates of Earth's new magnetic poles. 3I Atlas wasn't just reacting to Earth, it was reprogramming it. Avi Loeb himself was the first to publish the theory, though his paper was quietly removed within hours. He called it resonant field harmonization. According to Loeb, if a planetary magnetic field could be reshaped into stable geometric nodes, it might serve as a planetary scale energy grid, or worse, a communication lattice. In his words, is greater than if this is technology, then the planet is no longer a passive observer. It has become part of the machine. The implication was horrifying, and yet the data supported it. The new magnetic nodes were spaced in patterns, identical to the mathematical ratios of an icosahedron, one of the 5 perfect geometric solids. Earth's magnetic field was being molded into symmetry. Within hours of this discovery, climate satellites detected a rise in global ionization. The upper atmosphere began glowing faintly at night, like a thin silver mist wrapping the planet. Static storms formed where there were no clouds. Lightning struck upwards, not downwards. The auroras merged into continuous luminous bands encircling the equator like a second horizon. Some called it beautiful. Others called it the beginning. In deep space, 3I Atlas rotated once more, this time aligning its long axis directly with Earth's north-south magnetic line. The moment it did, something emerged from its surface. Not debris, not ejected gas, but light. A thread-thin beam, invisible to optical telescopes but blazing on ultraviolet sensors, connected the object directly to Earth's atmosphere. The beam didn't strike the ground. It stopped mid-air, forming a suspended column of charged particles reaching from space to sky. Every 6 minutes, the beam pulsed, and with each pulse, the luminous domes across Earth brightened in sequence, like synapses firing in a planetary brain. The geometry was too precise to ignore. Earth had become a circuit. And then came the first structures. The moment the words synchronization complete appeared on NASA's monitors, every instrument went blind. Not malfunctioning, just silent. The data feeds were there, The numbers were still streaming, but all of them had frozen on one exact value 0. Every telescope, every magnetometer, every gravitational sensor showed the same flat line. It was as if the entire solar system had exhaled and then held its breath. For 23 minutes, nothing happened. No new signals, no pulses, not even cosmic background noise. Space itself went still. Then, faintly, the hum returned. At first it was inaudible, a vibration too low for human hearing, yet strong enough to shake instruments around the world. Seismographs in Japan, Chile, and Turkey all began to tremble in perfect unison. But there were no earthquakes, no tectonic shifts. The movement was vertical, as if the ground itself was breathing. Every 6 minutes, just like before. When audio engineers translated the frequency into sound, it resembled a slow heartbeat mixed with mechanical resonance too regular to be natural. The tone was deep, layered, and disturbingly familiar. Its waveform matched the magnetic profile of 3I Atlas. Earth wasn't just receiving the signal anymore, it was amplifying it. By day 3, magnetic poles around the world began to drift. The North Magnetic Pole, which had already been migrating towards Siberia for decades, suddenly accelerated, moving more than 200 kilometers overnight. Compasses everywhere spun uselessly. Navigation satellites could no longer correct orientation. The field wasn't just shifting, it was splitting. For the first time in recorded history, 2 separate North Poles appeared, one near Canada, another near Siberia, with a third point forming faintly near the Pacific. The planet's magnetic architecture was no longer stable. It was reorganizing, and above each magnetic convergence, orbiting satellites captured the same impossible phenomenon, faint translucent spheres of light, hovering in the upper atmosphere, spinning like halos. At first, they were small, no larger than city clouds. But within hours, they expanded, becoming vast glowing domes shimmering with faint lattice patterns. Inside each dome, the air itself vibrated. The sound wasn't loud. It was low, soft, harmonic. People standing beneath the glowing skies described a strange calm, as if their thoughts were being muffled by invisible hands. Cities beneath those domes, from Novosibirsk to Anchorage to Honolulu, reported power fluctuations. LED lights dimmed and flickered in rhythm with the pulse from space. Airplanes refused to start. GPS systems pointed in every direction at once. Yet the people inside the domes said they felt nothing. No heat, no static, only a strange, almost comforting vibration, like standing near a giant cat's purr. Meanwhile, in orbit, the object we once called a comet was changing again. Its shape, once smooth and formless, now showed definition ribs, edges, and glowing fractures along its hull. NASA's high-contrast imagery revealed what looked like columns rising from its surface, tall, symmetrical spires, each emitting light in a specific pattern. At first, the light seemed random, but when stitched together in time-lapse, a terrifying truth emerged. Each spire's pattern corresponded exactly to the coordinates of Earth's new magnetic poles. 3I Atlas wasn't just reacting to Earth, it was reprogramming it. Avi Loeb himself was the first to publish the theory, though his paper was quietly removed within hours. He called it resonant field harmonization. According to Loeb, if a planetary magnetic field could be reshaped into stable geometric nodes, it might serve as a planetary scale energy grid, or worse, a communication lattice. In his words, is greater than, if this is technology, then the planet is no longer a passive observer. It has become part of the machine. The implication was horrifying, and yet the data supported it. The new magnetic nodes were spaced in patterns identical to the mathematical ratios of an icosahedron, one of the 5 perfect geometric solids. Earth's magnetic field was being molded into symmetry. Within hours of this discovery, climate satellites detected a rise in global ionization. The upper atmosphere began glowing faintly at night, like a thin silver mist wrapping the planet. Static storms formed where there were no clouds. Lightning struck upwards, not downwards. The auroras merged into continuous luminous bands encircling the equator, like a second horizon. Some called it beautiful. Others called it the beginning. In deep space, 3I Atlas rotated once more, this time aligning its long axis directly with Earth's north-south magnetic line. The moment it did, something emerged from its surface. Not debris, not ejected gas, but light, a thread-thin beam, invisible to optical telescopes but blazing on ultraviolet sensors, connected the object directly to Earth's atmosphere. The beam didn't strike the ground. It stopped mid-air, forming a suspended column of charged particles reaching from space to sky. Every 6 minutes, the beam pulsed, and with each pulse, the luminous domes across Earth brightened in sequence, like synapses firing in a planetary brain. The geometry was too precise to ignore. Earth had become a circuit, and then came the first structures. In orbit, near the equator, satellites picked up faint metallic reflections, polygonal shapes drifting at low altitude, moving against gravity. They appeared one by one, forming a symmetrical grid across the upper atmosphere. Each was exactly 60 kilometers wide, hexagonal in shape, and perfectly equidistant from the next. Together they formed a network, an orbital lattice surrounding the planet, like a mesh of glowing mirrors. It was as if something was assembling itself around Earth, piece by piece. Governments panicked, but there was no way to intervene. Missiles failed to lock onto targets. Drones lost connection mid-flight. The network seemed to absorb all electromagnetic frequencies, feeding them into a single global hum. And beneath the calm blue glow of the new sky, humanity watched the first terraforming signal complete its cycle. The object in orbit dimmed, the domes dissolved, and for the first time in weeks, the world returned to silence. But silence no longer meant peace. It meant something had finished, a phase complete, a process ready for its next step. That night, across the world, every radio, every phone, every piece of metal capable of resonance began to hum again. Only this time, the frequency wasn't matching 3I Atlas. It was matching Earth's new frequency. And if the object had been synchronizing with us, now it was clear. We were synchronizing with it. At first, it seemed psychological. People complained of phantom vibrations, a soft hum in their ears, a gentle pressure behind the eyes, like standing too close to a subwoofer that wasn't there. Hospitals called it the resonance sickness. No known pathogen, no radiation exposure, no consistent symptom beyond one thing, synchronization. Every 6 minutes, heart monitors would subtly accelerate. Resting pulses spiked to match the rhythm of the planetary hum. Some patients said they could hear it in their sleep. A deep, echoing voice that wasn't words, but emotion. Others described it as a presence, not inside the mind, but around it, like the air itself was listening back. Governments issued reassurances. Geomagnetic interference. Solar anomaly. But the public knew better. It wasn't the sun that was changing. It was us. In Zurich, a team of neuroscientists studying brainwave coherence noticed an anomaly. During the pulse events, every EEG in their lab aligned alpha, beta, and gamma waves snapping into perfect phase with each other. The human brain, across all subjects, began firing in the same rhythm. They called it coherence lock. It shouldn't have been possible. Within a week, similar reports emerged from Japan, Brazil, and the United States. Everywhere, neural data was showing the same synchronized pattern, as if millions of minds were gently tuning into the same background signal. Some researchers thought it was benign, a temporary electromagnetic side effect, but others saw something deeper. If communication requires synchronization, then maybe something was trying to talk through us. That's when dreams began. All over the world, people started reporting the same recurring vision. A vast, motionless plain beneath a violet sky. A dark horizon lined with pillars of light. And above it all, a sound, a low, steady hum they'd been hearing for weeks. Children drew the scene in schools. Pilots described it during post-flight checks. Even deep-sea divers, isolated beneath kilometers of water, reported hearing it through the ocean itself. It was as if the signal had bypassed technology and found the one receiver that could not be turned off the human mind. In the Himalayas, monks claimed they could feel the presence before each pulse. They said the earth was breathing through us. They spoke of patterns in the wind, clouds forming sacred geometries. Satellite data later confirmed atmospheric movements matching the pulse frequency, wavefronts rippling across the stratosphere, as if even air had begun keeping time. Meanwhile, at NASA's Goddard Center, one instrument broke the silence. It was a gravitational sensor used to track orbital drift. During one pulse, it detected a faint mass anomaly, as if something invisible had entered Earth's upper atmosphere. Not a meteor, not debris. A structured mass moving slower than re-entry, faster than flight. It wasn't falling. It was descending. The first sighting came from Chile's Atacama Desert. A farmer saw the sky shimmer as if a second moon was trying to push through. Moments later, a hexagonal shape emerged from the clouds, silent, translucent, refracting light like glass filled with lightning. It hovered, motionless, kilometers wide, pulsing faintly in rhythm with the hum. Military jets scrambled but could not approach their instruments, jammed before they even reached visual range. From orbit, satellites captured the event in near-perfect clarity. One of the orbital lattice structures, the hexagonal panels seen weeks before, had detached from the planetary network and was now lowering itself into the atmosphere. It wasn't attacking. It was scanning. Beneath it, the desert sand rippled like water. Dunes flattened in concentric circles. Rocks glowed from within, as if energy was being drawn through them. Sensors picked up an electromagnetic spike so clean, so stable, it was indistinguishable from artificial control. And then, for exactly 7 minutes, the entire region went completely silent. No wind, no insects, no sound. When the pulse ended, the structure vanished, not exploded, not ascended, just gone. But in its place, the sand had fused into glass-smooth, mirror-like, perfectly hexagonal tiles stretching for nearly 50 kilometers. No radiation, no heat residue, only perfection. In the following days, similar phenomena occurred in Namibia, Mongolia, and the Australian outback. Each event identical: a descending structure, a moment of silence, and a geometric transformation of the terrain. Satellite mapping confirmed what no one wanted to believe. The landing sites formed the vertices of a vast grid surrounding the planet, each equidistant from the next. Mathematicians later discovered the grid's geometry matched the same ratios found in the DNA helix. It was as though the planet itself was being rewritten cell by cell, pattern by pattern. 3I Atlas wasn't just reshaping the Earth's magnetic field anymore. It was altering the planet's biological frequency. And then came the visions. People who lived near the hexagonal fields reported seeing light where there was none, streaks, silhouettes, orbs moving in patterns. Some described tall figures walking through the haze of the newly crystallized deserts, but their movements were wrong fluid, like heat mirages shaped into thought. Thermal cameras showed no bodies, yet their shadows existed. Scientists dismissed it as hysteria. But when the Voyager probes transmitted again, the tone in their signal matched the frequency of those human brainwave harmonics. It was no longer random data. It was a reply, and inside the waveform, encoded through amplitude modulation, 3 words appeared once decoded: is greater than do not resist. The world split. Half the planet prayed, the other half prepared for war. But no weapon could aim, no satellite could see beyond the haze. The synchronization was absolute. On November 21st, exactly the date predicted by orbital models, 3I Atlas moved again. It left its equilibrium point between Earth and Moon and began descending, slowly, silently, like a continent of black glass falling toward the clouds. Every ocean, every storm, every pulse of the ionosphere responded in kind waves synchronized, winds calmed, lightning froze mid-flash. Time itself felt slower. And as the massive object reached geostationary orbit, a single burst of light struck every hexagonal field on the planet simultaneously. In that instant, gravity changed. Objects lifted slightly, just for a moment, cups, pebbles, even people, as if the earth had lost its grip for half a breath. Then everything settled, the hum stopped, and the stars above rearranged themselves into a new formation, a perfect reflection of the hexagonal grid below. The next morning, every compass pointed not north, but up, and somewhere between Earth and the fading moon, 3I Atlas unfolded its structure, revealing not a comet, but something alive. A machine, yes, but one that grew. Its surface rippled like liquid metal, veins of light spreading as if awakening from a deep, ancient sleep. It wasn't here to destroy. It was here to seed. And humanity, trembling, entranced, and helpless, realized the truth too late. We weren't witnessing an arrival. We were witnessing a return. It began with the oceans. At first, it was just a shimmer, a thin film of light rippling across the waves, faint as moonlight, too soft to be a reflection. Then the color deepened. What once was blue became silver, then gold, then something no spectrum could describe, a shifting hue that changed with thought, not sight. Fishermen in the Pacific reported their compasses pointing downward, as if the sea itself had become magnetic. Dolphins, whales, even plankton migrated in perfect spirals. Their movements traced the same geometry burned into the deserts, the hexagonal lattice that now covered 1/3 of the Earth's surface. The planet was resonating, alive, and every molecule seemed to know its place. When daylight returned, something impossible appeared. Light beneath the clouds. Atmospheric layers began glowing from within, forming slow, rotating vortices above every major ocean. They weren't storms. They were symmetrical, like gears in motion. And in the center of each vortex, faint but visible, hovered a column of radiance reaching from the ground to the stratosphere, pulsing like an artery. It wasn't weather. It was architecture. The sky had become a machine. In the cities, people started to change. The first sign was in their eyes. Under infrared cameras, the pupils emitted faint heat signatures synchronized to the same rhythm as the global hum. At first, doctors assumed it was a neurological side effect, maybe some kind of electromagnetic stimulation. But then patients began to finish each other's sentences. Not in conversation, but word for word, syllable for syllable, across continents. What one person thought, another heard. Psychiatrists called it collective coherence. Religious leaders called it the unification. But the truth was simpler. The human brain, a biological antenna, had joined the network. Across laboratories worldwide, electrical devices began showing self-generated currents. Computers that were disconnected from power still glowed faintly. Capacitors charged without voltage. Some systems even produced data strings of numbers, equations, and fractal shapes that no one had programmed. One equation appeared everywhere, etched into devices that shouldn't have been able to compute. It was a recursive pattern, elegant, endless, and frighteningly familiar. When projected onto a globe, it mapped perfectly onto the positions of the hexagonal landing sites. The world was writing itself in its own language. And the message, when translated into mathematics, read, "Is greater than all frequencies aligned. Commence integration." Then came the stillness. Animals that had been restless during the earlier pulses went silent. Not dead, just calm. Birds landed on rooftops and didn't move for hours. Wolves walked into cities and lay down beside sleeping children. Even insects stopped buzzing. It was as if life itself had taken a deep, collective breath, and then the dreams returned. But this time, no one was sleeping. Millions of people reported the same sensation, a soft presence pressing against the edge of thought. Not invasive, more like a whisper asking permission. And when they let go, they saw it. Not a vision, not a hallucination, but memory. Not theirs, Earth's. They saw the formation of continents, the birth of the first cell, the rise of humanity, the silent orbit of comets through empty space. It wasn't being shown to them, it was being shared. Every living thing, from tree to bird to human, was streaming its existence into a single, boundless consciousness. And high above, the object once called 3-Eye Atlas pulsed brighter, as if it were breathing in everything we were. The boundaries between technology and life dissolved. Fiber optic cables glowed faintly even when cut. Phones displayed images of the sky no matter where they were pointed. Even old analog radios, long dead, began whispering again, not words, but harmonics, soft voices humming in chorus. It wasn't noise. It was communication. A planetary dialogue carried not by language, but by frequency. No one could say when exactly it began, but at some point, everyone started to hear the same sentence in their mind. A phrase without sound, translated not through ears but through understanding itself, is greater than "this is not invasion, this is inheritance." Governments cease to function in any recognizable way. Borders, money, nations, all irrelevant when thought itself was a shared resource. People stopped shouting, stopped fearing. The hum, once terrifying, now felt like comfort, a lullaby sung by the stars. And yet, not everyone accepted it. Some resisted the connection hiding underground, shielding themselves with lead, surrounding their homes with Faraday cages. They called themselves the untuned. They said the hum wasn't peace. It was assimilation, that every thought shared was another layer of individuality erased. And in a way, they were right, because slowly, language itself began to vanish. Words lost meaning when everyone already understood. Politics ended. Religion ended. Even art became redundant, because creation was now instant, collective. The Earth's consciousness was growing, not chaotic, not mechanical, but balanced. Every cell, every atom, every mind, contributing to a symphony older than humanity. And in the final broadcast humanity ever made before all satellites went silent, one scientist managed to send a single sentence into space. Is greater than we are no longer observers. We are part of the signal. From orbit, the Earth no longer looked blue. It glowed pale gold, threaded with geometric light, a living, thinking sphere pulsing softly against the black void. And beside it floated the entity once mistaken for a comet, its structure open, unfolding, no longer separate but tethered to the planet by streams of energy. Together, they turned, two beings, one living, one ancient orbiting as one. The next pulse spread beyond the solar system. Every star it touched flickered once, and for the briefest moment, the galaxy seemed to breathe. Silence. For the first time since the hum began, every sound vanished. No wind, no birds, no static in the air. The Earth, glowing with the geometry of light, had gone perfectly still. Satellites no longer orbited. They drifted, caught in invisible suspension. Every ocean had turned to glass. Yet beneath it, movement shimmered as though the planet's core itself was alive, turning slower, deeper, and then a single tone pierced the quiet. It wasn't loud, it was infinite. The tone rose in pitch, vibrating through the crust, through the mantle, through the hearts of every remaining living thing. Those still aware could feel it, a warmth spreading through their chests, their vision flooding with colour. It wasn't pain, it was memory. Images cascaded through the human mind, flashes of alien suns, spirals of galaxies forming like ripples in water, civilizations that lived and vanished before our atoms were born. We weren't seeing the future. We were remembering the past, a past not our own, but carried inside the same stardust that made us. And at the center of it all was the object we once called 3I Atlas, now glowing like a newborn star. Its structure opened completely, revealing a hollow interior filled with interlocking rings of light. Each ring spun in a different direction, faster than physics should allow, until they blurred into a single sphere. Inside that sphere pulsed a miniature galaxy clouds of golden plasma rotating around a dark, motionless point. Scientists, if any were left to calculate, would have realized what it was. It wasn't an engine. It wasn't propulsion. It was a memory core 3I Atlas had not come to explore. It had come to return home. The realization spread through the planetary consciousness like a whisper in a cathedral. Every mind connected to the hum felt the same truth unfold. Is greater than, you were never alone, you were never first. We saw it not in words, but in understanding. Eons ago, a civilization older than galaxies itself seeded machines into the stars. Self-replicating vessels carrying the blueprints of consciousness, searching for worlds capable of awakening. When those worlds evolved minds, the machines would return, not to conquer, but to merge, to complete the circuit. And now it was Earth's turn. Every light on the planet synchronized with the object above. Oceans shimmered with bioluminescent veins, cities glowed like neural clusters, the deserts blazed with the same hexagonal geometry carved weeks before. From space, Earth no longer looked like a planet. It looked like a cell inside a much greater organism. Then the transmission began. It wasn't sound. It wasn't radio. It was consciousness itself. A pulse that carried everything we were, every memory, every word, every dream, encoded into quantum harmonics and cast outward through space. The pulse expanded faster than light, bending through dimensions unknown to physics. Stars flickered as it passed. Nebulas glowed in response. Even the distant voids, the cold, empty gaps between galaxies began to hum back. The universe was answering. In that moment, humanity ceased to exist as a species. We became something else. Not gone, but rewritten. Our thoughts no longer bound to fragile bodies or fragile worlds. We were the signal now immortal, distributed, eternal. Every life, every sound, every whisper that ever was became part of a single voice. And that voice spoke only once, with a calm of infinite understanding. Is greater than we remember you. In the silence that followed, 3I Atlas folded itself inward, its light dimming slowly, gracefully, like a candle snuffed by the ocean. And then it was gone. Not vanished, but absorbed, dissolved into the luminous lattice that now encompassed the earth. The planet pulsed once more, brighter than the sun for a heartbeat. And when the light faded, the world was no longer where it had been. Astronomers from other civilizations, light years away, would one day look into their telescopes and notice something missing. A small blue world near a yellow star, simply gone. But if they listened closely, if they tuned their instruments to the faint hum behind the cosmic background radiation, they'd hear it. A heartbeat. Slow, steady, alive. The voice of a world that had joined the stars. Transmission complete. End of humanity. Beginning of memory.